Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to F1 25. Finally, after almost 6 months, I don't know, it's been a while since last uploaded for F1 24, and now we are finally getting into the action for F1 25. It's been a while here, you know, life events, family events, social events, work, health, everything, yeah, you gotta find time for everything, and now it's time to get back into our hobbies. Now, so as usual, every year we start off with the setup guide. How do you set up your car? What works in this game and what doesn't work anymore? We'll go through that in this quick video. Hopefully, it's just about under 15 minutes for your convenience. Right, let's quickly take a look at all these presets that we have around here. In Monza, yeah, this is where I like to do all my testing because of the long straights, which test the car's aero efficiency, and then also with the low downforce nature, it helps you to find the good range of suspension setup. uh, Not always works right, but yeah, you have to test in different tracks to find out what works separately according to the track. Now, in this presets, you'll see mostly it's about the same, right? What I feel about this year's preset setups, they're pretty decent. Compared to a custom setup, you can gain in the custom setup about half a second to 1 second. It's way better than last year's game, right? Last year's you know presets were horrible. The custom setup gained you about easily a second and a half or so, um, if you know what you're doing, right? So far in this game, it's definitely way closer between the preset setups and the custom setups that you make, right? And not much difference here. The only difference mainly is going to be in the aerodynamics. As you can see here, it's a good preset to start with if you are working on your own setup. Just load in into the track of your choice and look at whatever setup is recommended to you and start making changes from there, right? But otherwise, if you're just going to steal a time trial setup and then work on it from there, yeah, that's another way to set up your car as well. And let's take a look at what you have done here for Monza. And this is just for testing. This is not the final Monza setup just yet. I've yet to do a full race run here. I've only done like 5-10 laps to feel the car in a Grand Prix mode across different tracks. So it takes a lot of time to do this alone, guys. So yeah, appreciate if you could leave a like, subscribe as well, and yeah, let's get into the setup guide for F125. Let's begin with the fuel load. Yeah, you want to be running the minimum fuel load during your qualifying, but in time trial you can't really adjust it, so leave it as it is. But for a qualifying session, you generally want to run it minimum 5 kilos, unless you're planning to do 2 runs. Yeah, then you may want to take 6 or 7 kilos into the qualifying session while you're on track. But anyway, yeah, for the race you will just be running whatever amount of fuel you need. Generally in this year's game, it's quite efficient with the fuel, so again we'll cover that uh, between the track guides that we're going to go through for each track. Let's continue with the aerodynamics. This is quite important, as every year it's going to determine how much downforce versus how much top speed you have in each car. In a track like Monza, you will want to be running as low as possible, 0-0, right? Maybe in certain conditions you may see 1-0, 2-0, nothing more than that, right? Unless it's a mixed condition, you may see like a little bit increased downforce. That's what you generally want to do for all setups in any track. Take your dry setup, just add on a little bit of front wing and rear wing, and it's good to go for the intermediate conditions. If it's a wet condition, maybe even a bit more, right? But yeah, generally speaking about the dry setups, go as low as possible for the race setup that you can. Now, what exactly each of this does, if you already know, yeah, then you can skip this. But yeah, when you add front wing, it's going to give you more front grip, whereas if you add more rear wing, it's going to give you more rear grip, right? And how about, you know, both the wings relative to each other? If you add more front wing compared to the rear, yeah, the car is going to be a lot more pointy, maybe a little bit more oversteer in the car if you like that. The opposite is also, you know, kind of true. Yeah, if you add more rear wing compared to the front, it's going to give you more stability in the car. And in terms of how much downforce you gain and how much top speed you lose by adding downforce in this year's game, it's way more apparent than F1 24. This year, even one click of front wing, you will notice that you will lose probably close to half a tenth sometimes in a long track like this, right? Maybe 2 or 3, 4, 5, yeah. 5-0, you definitely lose about 2 tenths overall in the entire lap in Monza. You gain probably like a tenth or 2 back in the corners, but it's not really worth it, right? You can gain that by just being a little bit more cautious in the race. Yeah, so yeah, there you go. That's pretty much the thing about downforce. It's going to matter a lot more in the race. For qualifying, maybe you can run a little higher for some tracks, but for low downforce tracks, keep it as low as possible. Again, it's personal preference. Try it out for yourself and see if it's going to be suitable for you. What's suitable for me may not be suitable for you. Well, what's suitable for you may not be suitable for me, right? But in general, these are the guidelines that you should be following. Now let's move to the transmission. And yeah, it's similar to 24, but you will notice that, you know, the engine braking is gone, so good riddance, I suppose. Anyway, the on throttle, you want to be running it as high as possible. The reason is, the higher it is, the better traction potential you will get out of slower corners. But remember, when it is higher, it's also going to cause a little bit of understeer in high speed corners. You can use this to your advantage if you have a very oversteery setup, a very pointy setup, right, where the front has more grip than the rear. You know, you will notice the rear is going to be sliding a little bit on the exit. You can increase your on throttle, which is going to stabilize the car a little bit when you're going on throttle in these slower corners. You know, likewise, if the setup is quite understeery, you can actually reduce the on throttle a little bit to, you know, give you a little bit more rotation while you're going on power. Sometimes you get front wing damage, or you know, if it's a wet race, I don't know, and you feel like the car is understeering, yeah, just reduce the on throttle a little bit from your MFD. And the opposite is true for the off throttle. It applies when you are, well, off the throttle, right? When you lift off the throttle fully, or you know, even partially, and when you're on the brakes, that's where you will feel the difference kicking in. When you are on the minimum level here, it's going to give you the most amount of rotation. The rear of the car will want to turn quite easily, which is good if you are trying to find some lap time in slow corners, but not so good if it's you know, a fast corner and the car is already super oversteery. So sometimes adding a little bit of off throttle can give you that stability that you need when going through you know, slow speed corners or even high speed corners in this game. Generally, you want to leave it as high as possible, around 90 to 100 for all the corners in this game. And for the off throttle, start with 10% maybe, and if you feel like in your qualifying, if it's good enough, then for the race you just go up about 10 to 15%. Same thing if you are starting your qualifying with about 20% off throttle, you can probably go to about 30 to 35% in the race. That's going to give you the stability you need in the race, because once tire wear kicks in, you will notice that yeah, the car is going to be a little bit hard to control sometimes. So yeah, play around with that. Let's move on to the suspension geometry, and it is still the same as F1 24, 23, whatever. Yeah, you want to be running everything on the minimum here. The reason is it's going to be the fastest way. Although in real life, you know, when you run this kind of camber alignment, it's supposed to be less draggy, but you know, it also comes with the cost of less rotation. So the benefit of running maximum, well, maximum negative camber to the left, it's going to give you a lot more ability to turn, right? More grip in the corners. You do lose a little bit of top speed, but it's very negligible. The amount of rotation you get in the corners, it's way more than that. So this is definitely a good thing to do. And for the front toe and rear toe, running it minimum like this will give you the least amount of drag. So it's going to be quicker in a straight line compared to, you know, something like this. It's going to give you a lot of drag on the straights. So you're going to be slower, but remember, if you want a little bit more sharpness on the front, right? When you turn the car initially into a corner and the tires you want the tires to turn a bit more, you can increase the front to about a click or two. Whereas on the rear, if you want a little bit more stability into the braking zones, in the slower corners, but you know, reduce the oversteer on the rear basically, you can increase the rear toe a little bit. This is especially helpful in a racetrack, in a race run where there's a lot of rear tire wear. Say something like Baku, Canada. These are some of the tracks that choose your rear tires every time. So having a little bit of rear toe might be beneficial if you are trying to get a good race setup here. Otherwise, leave it at minimum and you have a decent setup to start with. Now let's move on to the suspension, which is sort of the dark arts here along with the tires, right? Once you have decided what aero package you want to be running, right? Whatever aero levels that you want to run, then you come and adjust your suspension, because this is going to help you to fine tune your overall aero setup. You start off with the ride height, my way at least, you know, I like to start with the ride height, find out at which level the car will start to bottom out. So if I go lower, yeah, on this track in Monza, it's definitely going to bottom out. You will have a lot more grip in the corners, but it's not worth it for the top speed that you lose, right? So around 18 to 20 is what I feel is a good baseline for low downforce track. Whereas if you go to a higher downforce track, somewhere around 20 to 22, 23 even, maybe with a softer front suspension, it's a good range to run. 25 maybe even at tracks like Spa, where you have to go through Eau Rouge and Raidillon without bottoming out, right? So there's track to track optimizations that you will have to make, but in general, run it as low as possible that you can, right? The only way you want to know if it's going to bottom out or not, you have to go on track and test it out for yourself. Take note that sometimes in the race, qualifying versus a race setup, a bit heavier fuel, you know, the car will require maybe just a little bit more ride height, just so in the race, a bit heavier fuel, you do not bottom out the car and you do not lose the car in the corners. So a safer setup will be, you know, just raising the ride height a little bit equally for the race. But if you're confident with all the testings that you have done, you're like, yeah, this is the perfect optimal numbers, blah blah blah, go for it. You know, once you've done your experiments, you're confident with it, go for it. Otherwise, stick with the basics. So once you've found out what is the optimal ride height you want in that track, you can also start adjusting your suspension. You want to be running minimum rear suspension for most of the tracks, so that you get better traction, right? The rear is a lot more stable on the corner exits, and it's going to improve your tire wear as well, because the rear is sliding less and less. For the front suspension, you want it stiff so that the front is stable and more predictable on corner entry. What I mean by predictable means you know, when you turn the car into the corner, you can feel and visually see what the car is doing, right? You know, if you turn a little bit more, yeah, it's gonna turn, or if you turn less, it's gonna turn, well, turn less, right? And when you go back on throttle, you'll be confident that the car is going to go in the direction that you want. So stiff, I would say somewhere around 36 onwards, up to 41 is the stiff range. I like to run it in the last year's game, you know, mostly around 39, 40, 41. It still is somewhat the same. You can run it a little softer, maybe 2 clicks softer from the maximum, if you want the front to bite a little bit more in the slow speed corners. Higher is going to be better for stability. Lower is going to give you a bit more compliance on the curves. It's easier to take the curves, and the car doesn't bounce that much on the curves. So yeah, stick around here. And then rear suspension, like I say, keep it as soft as possible. Whereas for the anti-roll bars, these are, yeah, a bit questionable, right? You know, I did my best time in Monza time trial with 1-1 anti-roll bars. But yeah, it's going to come down to how you want the car to respond. If you want the rear to be very lively, the rear to rotate most of the time, you can increase the rear anti-roll bar, which will give you more rotation on the rear. But if you want the car to, you know, turn more on the front, then you reduce the front suspension. Reduce the front anti-roll bar. So think of it as like an extra suspension, but it works usually only when the car is rolling, right? When you're turning, there's a side-to-side weight transfer going on in the car. So it's a lot more simplified since last year. Now, once you have adjusted your suspension, your ride height, only then I would recommend adjusting the front anti-roll bar and rear anti-roll bar to give you some, you know, optimization. And you know, you can start off with 1 on the front and maybe 21 on the rear just to, you know, test it out and see if this is going to work for you. Or you can even you know, start with 1-1 or 21-21, whichever you prefer, right? It's sort of like I said, it's a dark art. You never know what's going to be the best right now versus what's going to be the best in 6 months from now. So all you have to do is keep experimenting with this and see what suits you. Like I said just now, what suits you may not suit me, and you know, the opposite is also true. And yeah, the main thing here is you want to be making sure that you have a very comfortable race setup that's also fast and confident for you to push. Let's move to the well, before we go to the brakes, let's just finish off with the ride height here, right? Lower is definitely better for downforce. You'll gain more downforce in the car, but it's easier to bottom out on the curbs and even bottom out on bumpy tracks on the long straights. If you go higher, it's easier to take some of the high curbs in the game without losing the car. So sometimes a compromise. Tracks like Imola, you may want it to be a little bit higher so that you can run on the curbs, but you can maybe add some more wings to compensate for the loss of cornering grip that you get from a higher ride height, if that makes sense, right? But yeah, anyway, let's move on to the brakes here. You want to be running 100% brake pressure always. The only exception is, like last year, if it's a full wet race, yeah, sometimes the wet tires, the intermediate tires, they kind of feel wonky in these rainy conditions. Then you can run 98 or 97% brake pressure to stop the tires from locking up excessively if you are running without ABS. But you know, if you have perfect control of your brake pedals, just run 100% and it's going to be very, very good to control. There will be some difference you will notice in the drive, but in the wets, sometimes it is beneficial to run a little bit lower, you know, contrary to popular advice. Yeah, so run whatever is suitable for you. Whereas for the brake bias, it's again personal preference to some extent. You want to run a little higher when you are in the race, in a race stint, when your tires are wearing out. Usually, let's say you start off at 54 in Monza, right? And for qualifying, I would probably start at 55 for the race. And then as the tires start to wear out, I'll go up to 56, maybe even 57 if you feel like it's going to improve your stability on the front. As for the cornering speed, slower corners, you would want to run a little bit higher on the front brake bias so that the car, you know, has enough front and rear grip. For the high speed corners where you're just going to be tapping the brakes a little bit, you can run very low brake bias just so the car rotates around the corner much easily. Yeah, again, personal preference, try it out from corner to corner and you will find what's best for you. And finally, let's move on to the tire pressures. Similar to last year, running maximum tire pressures in the race, mind you, ignore this time trial for a moment. For the race, maximum tire pressures will give you least amount of tire wear, which means, you know, better tire wear overall, and also least amount of tire temperature, so potentially no less to no overheating in the race. However, because certain tracks have softer tire compounds, you will notice that they um, may require higher tire pressures. So yeah, bump it up so that the overheating is reduced. In certain tracks like maybe Suzuka, where they have the hardest range of tires, maybe you will find a little bit lower tire pressure to give you the optimal tire temperature in the race and qualifying. So again, to start your tire pressures, just start with maximum and then experiment by going lower throughout the practice session to see where it really starts to overheat, right? um, that's the best advice I can give you. Again, it's going to be a very subjective matter. If you're going to be an aggressive driver, you will probably need to run higher tire pressures because, you're going to be overheating your tires more easily. If you're a very smooth driver and patient in the race, you can probably get away with running lower tire pressures to give you a little bit more grip in the corners, but with your smooth driving, you're still having less tire wear anyway. And yeah, there you go. That is the basics of how you want to be setting up your car. Let's recap. Aerodynamics, you want to be running minimal downforce, in top speed tracks like Monza, Miami and whatnot, Las Vegas for example. Whereas for tracks like Spain, you'll notice like the setup is usually on the higher mid to high downforce range or even higher than that, right? But you don't want to be running too high of a downforce because you will lose a lot of time on the straight. And yeah, it's going to be super hard to overtake, especially with how easy it is to recharge your battery in this game. Okay, and for qualifying, if you have park permit turned off, you can run a little bit higher downforce to gain more time in the qualifying, and then put it back down for the race, so you have better top speed for overtaking and defending in the race. Transmission 110 is a good basic baseline to start with. Go lower if you want more rotation, go high if you want less rotation and stability. For the rear, when you increase it you get more stability, when you reduce it you get more rotation. Suspension geometry, just run it minimum, you don't have to worry about this. Suspension, stiff front and soft rear equals to the sweet spot in any racing title actually. You want to be running close to maximum on the front and close to minimum on the rear. Don't go higher than 5 for now unless you find it usable in certain tracks. And anti-roll bar, try whatever is suitable for you. If you want more stability, increase your front anti-roll bar relative to the rear. If you want more rotation, you can reduce the front anti-roll bar also, right? For the rear, if you want more stability, reduce the anti-roll bar. If you want more rotation on the rear, increase the rear anti-roll bar. Try it out for different corners. Ride height as low as possible to improve your downforce and improve your top speed to a certain extent. But if you go too low, yeah, then you're going to be bottoming out on the straights, and also you're going to be hopping like a kangaroo over the curbs in this game. So you need some amount of ground clearance to take the curbs, but you don't want it to be too high either. If you go too high, you will lose a lot of downforce and you will lose a lot of top speed also. So you can cut all the curbs that you want, but you're not going to be gaining any time at all. Brakes, maximum brake pressure, you can run a little lower for the race in the wets only, but otherwise keep it 100% all the time. Brake bias, you can go lower for high speed corners with minimal braking, and for higher amount of braking, when you're on the brakes for at least 1 or 2 seconds, or heavy braking like turn 1 in Monza, 54, 55, 56, even sometimes even 57 in the race. It's what you want to be at. Personal preference again, so try it out. tire pressures. Start off with maximum, and if you need more temperature in the tires, say if the tire is not heating up quick enough in the qualifying, then you can try a little bit lower. Same for the race. If you feel like throughout the race stint the tires are not heating up well enough, then you can drop the tire pressures. Otherwise, stay close to maximum for now. Sometimes you may even see like certain tracks you want to be running close to minimum rear tire pressures for better traction. But yeah, I feel like again it's subjective, right? It will vary from track to track. Try it out and see which suits you, right? Not what suits your buddy over on the other side, right? Yeah, there you go. Hopefully you've enjoyed this, and stay tuned for the track guides that will be coming out very very soon. The first one is going to be Spa in a couple of days in conjunction with the Real Life Belgian GP. So take care everyone, stay safe, and let's get going in F1 25 again.